They told him he was too old 40 years ago. Now at 94, Clint Eastwood is still making movies while dating a woman half his age. His crazy morning routine starts at 5 o'clock a.m. with a workout that would kill most 30-year-olds. He flies his own helicopter. He hates birthday parties. And he just bought another multi-million-dollar property because it looked nice. Hollywood's toughest cowboy isn't just surviving at 94. He's living a life so wild even his own kids can't believe it. Clint Eastwood wasn't supposed to be a legend. In fact, everything about his early life pointed the other way. He wasn't born into poverty like people think. He came into the world on May 31st, 1930, weighing over 11 pounds, so big that nurses called him Samson. His family lived well in a wealthy neighborhood in Piedmont, California. They had 2 cars, a swimming pool, and a country club membership. His mom could trace their family line all the way back to the Mayflower. But even with all that privilege, Clint didn't have an easy path, and much of the rugged blue-collar persona he later built wasn't exactly true. It was part of the image he created to survive in Hollywood. As a kid, school was a struggle. He failed junior high and had to repeat a grade. At Oakland Technical High, teachers saw something special in him, especially on stage. But Clint ignored their advice. He was too caught up in chasing cars and girls. His school record showed more interest in fixing engines than doing homework. Some of his friends even thought he never officially graduated. But there was one thing that hinted at the artist inside him. He could play the piano like a pro. He practiced until his fingers hurt, learning complicated pieces that most teens wouldn't bother with. That same focus would one day help him write film scores for his own movies. After high school, Clint didn't jump into acting. He took on some pretty wild jobs. At one point, he was taming wild logs in Oregon, a job where one wrong move could kill you. Then he got drafted into the Army. Stationed at Fort Ord, he made extra cash as a lifeguard and a bouncer. One night, he even broke up a knife fight. But the real turning point came in 1951. He was in a Navy aircraft that went down near Point Reyes. The crash wasn't the end. He had to swim more than 2 miles through freezing water filled with sharks. He later called it stark terror. That experience stuck with him. Years later, when he starred in Escape from Alcatraz, he drew on that exact moment to make the cold water escape scene feel real. His acting career didn't exactly start with a bang. In 1955, he landed a tiny role in Revenge of the Creature, a low-budget monster movie. He played a nervous lab tech named Jennings whose big moment involved losing a rat. The director hated the scene and wasn't shy about showing it. Clint only had 28 lines, and it took 15 takes to get it right. He was paid $75 a week, and Universal nearly cut the scene entirely. Nobody on set had any clue that this awkward guy, fumbling with a lab coat, would go on to become one of the biggest stars in film history. No matter how well-intentioned they might be, no matter what their illusions might be, I have my veto pen drawn and ready for any tax increase that Congress might even think of sending up. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day. In the mid-1950s, Universal Pictures ended his contract after just 18 months. They thought he wasn't good enough for the screen. The reasons were almost laughable. His Adam's apple was too big, his speech too slow, and he had a chipped tooth he wouldn't fix. Around the same time, Burt Reynolds was also let go. As they stood in the Universal parking lot, Reynolds joked, "You're really screwed because I can learn to act. You can't lose that Adam's apple." Years later, Eastwood would return to that same studio, but this time as a superstar with a $1 million paycheck. The same place that tossed him aside now had to welcome him back as a leading man. Then came the moment that changed everything. One day, while talking to a story editor at NBC, Clint was spotted by CBS executive Robert Sparks in the studio cafeteria. Sparks noticed how tall and striking he looked. That quick glance led to a meeting, then a screen test, and eventually a lead role in the Western series Rawhide Deed. It was pure chance, being in the right place, looking the right way at the right moment. Suddenly, the man who'd been rejected for his looks and laid-back attitude was being celebrated for those exact same things. His face was in TV Guide, and producers were calling him a rising star. The same slow speech and rugged style that got him fired were now pulling. and millions of viewers every week. But Eastwood didn't even like the character. He thought Rowdy was too immature, but he went along with it. What started as a backup gig turned him into a national name almost overnight. Within 3 weeks of airing, the show cracked the top 20 in TV ratings. But behind the scenes, it was exhausting. 6 days a week, long hours, boiling Arizona heat. His pay went from $750 per episode to a staggering $119,000 per episode when the show ended. Still, some people thought he was lazy. Directors would plan their day around him being late. One even said he never put Clint in the first scene because he was guaranteed to show up at least half an hour late. By the 6th year of Rawhide, Eastwood had had enough. He was bored and desperate to try something new. That's when a strange opportunity came his way from an unknown Italian director making a low-budget Western in Spain. The director, Sergio Leone, was using a fake American name, Bob Robertson, because no one in the United States took Italian Westerns seriously. Eastwood wasn't even Leone's first choice. He had tried to get bigger names like Henry Fonda or James Coburn, but none of them fit the budget. Eventually, Clint agreed to do it. He figured it was such a small film that nobody in America would even notice if it failed. He took the chance and flew to Spain. Even though he didn't speak Italian and Leone didn't speak English, they used hand gestures, translators, and a lot of guessing to make it work. That movie, A Fistful of Dollars, turned Clint Eastwood into an international star. But it wasn't just his acting that stood out. Eastwood created the whole look of his character himself. The outfit wasn't designed by a big studio wardrobe team. He pieced it together from his own stuff. He bought a pair of black Levises, bleached and roughed them up, reused boots and belt from Rawhide, and picked up a hat from a secondhand store. Even the small cigars and poncho came from random shops he found along the way. The whole vibe of the man with no name was built on purpose. Eastwood wanted him to say very little and let his body language do the talking. That silence made the character seem more powerful and mysterious. And even though his name changed from movie to movie, Joe Mango Blondie, audiences just saw him as the same silent gunslinger. The studio marketed them as a trilogy, and the image stuck. When these films finally hit the United States, critics hated them. They were loud about it, too. Some called the first one cheap jack. Another said the second was dopey. And one New York Times review slammed the good, the bad, and the ugly as a repellent disaster. Time magazine took shots at Eastwood's acting, saying he looked like a piece of wood. But the audience had the final word. The trilogy earned over $84 million worldwide on a budget that barely cracked $2 million. One movie alone, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, brought in almost $39 million and more than 44 million ticket sales. These so-called spaghetti westerns took off and inspired a whole wave of similar movies. Critics eventually came around, but not before Eastwood had already changed the game. Clint Eastwood didn't just become a Hollywood legend. He took that status by force and never let go. His journey to superstardom took a major leap in 1971 when he stepped into the role of Detective Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry. But believe it or not, that role was never meant for him. It was first offered to Frank Sinatra, who worked on it for months before quitting. Paul Newman passed because he didn't like the politics. But Newman didn't just turn it down. He passed the script directly to Eastwood, saying it might be a good fit. Others bailed, too. John Wayne didn't want Sinatra's leftovers. Robert Mitchum thought it was garbage. And Steve McQueen said no because he'd already played a cop in Bullet. One by one, Hollywood's biggest stars stepped back. And Eastwood stepped forward. He took the risk, brought in his own production company, and hired his own director. That film didn't just hit, it exploded. Then Eastwood did something no one expected. In 1978, he signed on for Every Which Way But Loose, a comedy about a street-fighting trucker and his pet orangutan named Clyde. Everyone thought it would wreck his career. This was the tough guy from Dirty Harry, and now he was babysitting a monkey. But Eastwood didn't care. He believed in it. The movie was slammed by critics, but audiences loved it. It made over $100 million and became his biggest hit. Even more shocking, the sequel pulled in another $70 million. Together, they made nearly $1 billion by today's standards. But behind the laughs was a dark twist. Clyde the orangutan was allegedly beaten to death by his trainer after stealing donuts on set. A sickening end to one of Hollywood's weirdest success stories. That kind of risk-taking wasn't new for Eastwood. In 1975, he was filming The Eiger Sanction, a movie that involved deadly mountain climbing. While shooting on the Eiger Mountain's north face, a climber on the crew was killed by falling rocks. Eastwood, who was both the star and director, nearly shut down the film. But instead, he made a decision that stunned everyone. He'd do all the dangerous stunts himself. He climbed cliffs, hung from ledges, and filmed without the kind of safety gear we'd expect today. At 44 years old, he risked his life for the movie, and it wasn't even his first brush with death. Years earlier, he'd survived a plane crash in shark-infested waters during his Army days. He later said if he'd known about the sharks, he probably would have died from fear alone. Eastwood's confidence in himself also kept him from chasing the wrong roles. He was offered Superman in the late 70s. Yes, that's Superman, but turn it down flat. That's not for me, he said. Same with James Bond. Had he accepted, he would have been the first American to play 0007. But he knew better. He understood his brand. Eastwood wasn't the guy in tights or tuxedos. He was the guy with a squint and a gun. By the end of the decade, Clint Eastwood wasn't just a leading man. He was a force behind the camera, too. With his own production company, the Mal Paso Company, he had full say over his movies. He wasn't just choosing his roles. He was shaping them from the ground up. If the script didn't feel right, he changed it. If the studio hesitated, he pushed harder. Even when people laughed at him for starring in a comedy with a monkey, he made it work and made a fortune. Clint Eastwood had been acting for years, but by 1971, he was done playing by other people's rules. He wanted to direct, to take full control of what happened in front of and behind the camera. So, when Play Misty for Me became his directorial debut, he went Allen. No backup plan, no second-guessing. Most first-time directors go over budget, run late, and get chewed up by studio politics. Eastwood did the opposite. He shot the entire movie in his hometown, Carmel by the Sea, using real locations like a local radio station and restaurant instead of fancy sets. He finished the movie early and under budget by $50,000. Even the music was done on his terms. He personally got the rights to Raw Bear of Flax, the first time ever I saw